I was just so desperate for somebody to love me. It was like, wow, somebody's paying attention to me.
Welcome to the Yearning Heart podcast, where we discuss with everyday people our journeys towards love, our growth, and the yearnings of our hearts. In this episode of the Yearning Heart podcast, I'm going to be talking with Janet. Janet grew up in an alcoholic family, which deeply impacted her development. So we're going to be looking at a number of things. One of the things is how growing up in an alcoholic family affected her self-esteem, how she developed internal critical voices and judgments because that's how she was treated, her sense of desperation for love and putting up with too much, how she didn't know how to say, this doesn't work for me, or no, her history of emotionally abusive partners, all this coming out of being raised in an alcoholic family. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to introduce Janet, who is going to be talking with me today. And she is developing an online course called Journey to Being You, which is not out yet, but will be out in how long, Janet?
Within the next few months.
So just to keep your eyes open for that. And today we're going to talk to Janet about what she's learned in relationships, her growth, struggles. My first question, Janet, is when I bring up the word relationship, what comes up for you?
So many things. I've been divorced 5 years and I'm not in an intimate relationship right now. I have a lot of great friends. Part of what's up for me is I have a number of friends and family, like from my past, who we have opposing values in terms of everything going on in the world right now, from politics to religion. That's been a strain on a number of relationships. I'm really grateful for the kindred spirits that I have in my life who do have similar values. I continue to grow and learn and explore my own inner being through clarification of knowing what does not work for me, especially these days.
I want to get back to your divorce in a little bit. A lot of focus here is on the intimate relationships and on what happened in our family of origin that caused us to choose who we chose and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like you're in a time in your life where you're the focus. You are developing yourself. Yeah. You're learning what's working for you. And obviously that's important for all people to have the ability to be with themselves and understand what they need and refine that.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So you're in that chapter right now. And are you enjoying it?
I am. Even though through phases, through the decades of my personal growth, I have found that it's an ever-evolving process. Having grown up in an alcoholic home, my parents drank heavily, and at one point my mom quit and then my dad quit when I was 10, but they still went on fighting for years. But by the time you're age 10, and a lot of your personality is affected by your environment. In that dynamic of the family, I was very quiet as a mouse. People would always call me shy for years. Even through college, I barely dared to speak in public. It was because I was told I was stupid, and if I would ever give my opinion, I was told all my taste was in my mouth, which took me a while to figure out what that meant, but it's that I don't have any taste in other things in life.
Jennifer here. When you grow up in an alcoholic family, at least this kind of alcoholic family, it can have a lot of negative impacts. So her healing had to come out of a chapter of self-focus.
I decided to explore. I started with inner child work way back in the days of John Bradshaw. I've been to so many wisdom teachers and healers, and yet I would still continue to get into dysfunctional relationships. One of the big breakthroughs came about 10 years ago when Bessel van der Kolk came out with the book, The Body Keeps the Score, and I got the gravity of the fact that we hold our traumas and dramas in ourselves. That was also when I was doing my own exploratory work in writing a book. I developed the Being Compass through teachings from neuroscience to ancient wisdom. I synthesized. Being is an acronym with B for body. It's to expand awareness. Body awareness is the foundation I use to develop a better relationship with myself and others. I was still numbing out a lot of ignoring when you get the red flags, the gut punch when you're starting an intimate relationship. And it's like, no, but I like this aspect of this person. So shoo away.
Jennifer here, interjecting. So first, Janet had a history of numbing out, sort of separating from her body. And for her, part of her healing process required that she get in touch with her body awareness. What is my body feeling? Let's suppose you're having a feeling and you don't know what it is. You just know that something's wrong. So you start tuning into your body. My stomach is tight. What does my stomach have to say? My stomach might say, I'm frightened, or this is scary. Or you might have a tense shoulder. What is my shoulder trying to say? My shoulder might be saying, you're carrying too much. You're carrying a burden. Put this down. This is too hard. So tuning into the body, and there's different ways to tune into the body, but tuning into the body, especially if you're someone who numbs out of the body, is a really good healing method to start opening awareness so you have more capacity to deal with what's going on inside of yourself and create a better relationship with yourself. So you're not just outer focused on the abusive partner, you're focused on taking care of yourself. And this connects with inner child work, where you start saying, I am lovable. I am okay. You're focusing in on yourself and not trying to keep the partner who is out of line happy. So you pushed away the red flags.
Yeah.
This happened in your relationship with your husband?
Yeah. When I think about it now, and this was, 25 years ago, I can totally see that I did that even then I had thought that I had done such a level of evolving.
That shouldn't have happened.
Yeah, right.
But it takes forever to, untangle all this stuff. What were the red flags?
I'm editing in my mind, thinking this is going public, and I could say a lot. But
I think what you were saying is, I have a lot to say, but I also have to be cautious because I have a relationship with my daughter, and I don't want to mess that up by saying negative things about her father.
Yeah.
It makes you cautious about talking about some of the negative stuff that happened in your marriage because you don't want to push your daughter away and she doesn't see things the way you do.
Yeah. I think she has witnessed, and she and I have discussed that I'm not okay with people talking condescendingly to me, which was an issue. So that's pretty much out in the open.
You don't have to talk about the specific red flags. What we're really talking about here right at this moment is when you're in a relationship with someone or you've left a relationship with someone and the need to be sensitive to the other family members. So you want to speak your truth and you have a right to speak your truth. And there's people who you were close to, like in this case, perhaps your daughter, who would not appreciate you sharing negative things about what you've learned in your marriage that you would not go back and do again. I just want to break in and say, I have a book that's getting published. It's right now called Love's Cauldron. And it is about my growing up and all the challenges and everything I've lived through that has changed me, all the work I've done. But I don't use anyone's names because I'm going to share stuff that they're not going to see the same way as me. Some of them, I'm at a point where I need to say my truth, but you're in a trickier place. It's your daughter. Jennifer here again. Janet brings up ignoring red flags. And we aren't talking about those red flags in this particular podcast because there's fear that she may ruin a relationship with her child by being honest about what she saw that she ignored. So here we get to this really tricky place that everybody runs into, which is, do I deserve to tell my truth? And what will my truth do to other people? And it depends where you're at in your development, what's important to you, what you need to do. But telling your truth is a big step in loving oneself. Maybe you don't need to tell your truth, but this is a dilemma that many people come up against, which is, can I tell my truth? What if other people don't agree? What if they get mad at me? You have a right to tell your truth. Period. You have a right to tell what your experience is, which is your truth. And that is part of healing. And yes, you may lose relationships. And if you aren't willing to lose a specific relationship, then you don't do it. You suppress that part of yourself, or you tell your truth somewhere else.
And I have written publicly about living with alcoholic parents, etc. One sister was supportive. One who has not been interested in facing heartfelt issues. At one point, I asked her if she had the chance to read it, and she said, "Well, I looked at the pictures, and I thought that summarizes
She
pretty
can't
much
go there.
everything." Yeah,
She can't go there, and it also means she can't be a real support for what you've gone through. Jennifer, jumping in here again. When a person or family member cannot hear our truth, that means they cannot fully support us. When a person cannot hear our truth, they will not be a real support for us. They can't be because they can't take in how we experienced, what our feelings were, the support we currently need around what had happened. You don't go to someone who can't hear your truth for support because
right.
she can't face. Yeah, I mean, there's this whole thing where people protect their parents, and yes, I understand we love our parents, and we're the kid, and it's not our job to protect them, and they
Yeah,
need to be accountable. And I think a lot of people, it takes them a while to get there, where they
yeah,
don't trust that their parents can take care of themselves, and that we get to say, hey, that really affected me, or that really hurt me. I think that can be difficult for people to go there.
yeah.
Jennifer, jumping in here again. Protecting parents does not help us. It's really common for people to protect their parents, to say, oh, they didn't mean it, they were doing their best, nothing bad happened, or it was my fault. When we protect our parents, we are not giving them a chance to be adult, to take care of themselves. We're assuming that they can't do that. And we, the child, have to take care of them. And we've probably been doing that since we were little, taking care of our parents. But part of growing up and becoming an independent, autonomous, healed human is saying our truth, even if it feels critical of our parents. We can still say, I love my parents. That was what they were capable of doing, but this is what happened. This is how it hurt me.
There was one point, I guess I was in my 20s, where I was living with a guy, and it was very insidious, where he became more and more emotionally abusive to the point where my self-esteem was in the total gutter. And a friend was moving out to California to go to law school to San Diego. I decided that I would make my escape, so to speak. And so we caravan, and I got as far as Phoenix. I realized I was pretty much having a nervous breakdown. And I said, I can't go any further. I called my parents sobbing. My dad, he's afraid to fly. Well, he's passed away now. So he actually took a bus from North Dakota, where we lived, and met me in southern Utah. So I drove one day and met him there, and then he drove back with me because I was hanging on to my life by a thread.
Yeah.
And we spent the couple days together traveling. One stop was in West Yellowstone. We went out to dinner and then went for a walk, and he opened up and told me about his abusive childhood and how he was a star basketball player, and they won the state tournament, and he had state records in track, and his parents never came to one event because his older brother was more academic, and that's what they appreciated. And he just felt totally invisible. He was almost crying about his childhood. And then later, after he passed away, my mom told me that my dad had been beaten with a lash as a young boy. So he had even more ghosts and goblins. It's kind of like do your best. We weren't beaten with a belt. There were other things. You know, in some ways you see all the traumas, but then you realize that they actually did better than what they
Right.
knew.
Jennifer here again. Abuse is often generational. And you'll hear this as Janet just spoke, how her father was beaten, whipped, lashed. He was abused. He was put down. He wasn't seen as valuable as a sibling. And then, while he didn't abuse his daughter in that way, they were critical. Abuse is generational. It carries down from generation to generation. You want to find a way to heal yourself, to break the cycle. Despite the difficult stuff that happened, they improved on what their experience was with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
I
you
guess,
deserve
in the
that.
big picture, that isn't that what we try to do throughout generation after generation, is to at least improve. Hopefully we make more leaps and bounds
Yeah.
when there's real trauma involved.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you think your childhood, growing up with two people that were addicted to alcohol, at least for part of your childhood, which means they probably weren't that tuned into you and they were probably more volatile and all that kind of stuff. How do you think that impacted your choice of partners? I imagine it created low self-esteem.
Just like is so common of, say, domestic violence victims. I didn't come from that, but I went out with people who drank way too much for several relationships, and one who basically sat and smoked pot all day, to the point where I couldn't carry on a conversation. If you can't have meaningful conversations, then what's the purpose?
What's going on? Yeah. So I'm going to guess that falling in love, this is what happens to everyone. We fall in love, and the chemistry is so powerful that we lose our ability, not always, but this is common, especially with people who've had difficult childhoods. We lose our ability to go, this is not okay, and I don't want this,
Right.
because we either try to change them or we hang in there, but we don't have the part of us that would say, no, I don't think so. I mean, it took me years to develop
Exactly.
that part. Jennifer jumping in here again. Generally, alcoholics and or addicted parents will not be able to provide the emotional support that a child needs. It's just usually an alcoholic environment, an addiction environment. The addiction is running the show often. And there isn't the capacity to focus in on what the child needs, because the person who has an addiction is focused on whatever they're using that addiction for, escaping feelings, self-regulating in a non-relational way. Whatever they're using that addiction for, it is overriding the ability to be 100% nurturing to the child.
Yeah. And now I'm at a point where I could easily say, that doesn't work for me. And to think that I went so many years without being able to say that, or to say, let's think about what's happening in the dynamic between us right now, and be with a partner who's willing to do that.
Right. And willing to be an equal partner and show up properly. And yeah. So my first husband was pretty critical, actually, too. And I put up with way more than I should have until I, got through that and somehow changed.
Yeah.
But I think, it's like when we grow up in an environment where we don't get nourished the way we need to be nourished, there's always that hungry little child inside of us that just needs to be loved so badly. It's not the part that can say no. It's the part that needs, and that part runs the show until we can build a stronger self that can step in and say, no, you don't, no, I'm here for you. Big me talking to little me. I'm here for you. And no, we're not going to deal with this.
Yeah. And you make a good point, because if the first guy I dated, if he had beaten me, I don't know if I would. I mean, luckily I didn't fall for somebody who did that, because you nailed it when you said I was just so desperate for somebody to love me. It was like, wow, somebody's paying attention to me. So by the grace of God, it could have been worse.
The universe handed you specific people.
Yeah.
And they were bad enough, but they weren't the worst.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, I don't know what they had to learn from you, because obviously we're learning from each other. But certainly in my case, in your case, the learning was to eventually go, I deserve more.
Yeah. And getting back to that communication, to be able to express ourselves, it goes into, for me, on my evolution of growth and the development of my being compass, the E in being is emotion. So it's emotional intelligence, emotional awareness. So within that frame, I teach all different types of tools on expanding your emotional awareness. Emotional awareness does come after the increased level of body awareness and being able to tap into those sensations, into the body's wisdom. Once we can tap into those signals, the emotions and body basically go hand in hand. So, those key elements, body and emotions, expanding awareness in those two, which is what I've been practicing for years now, are what set the foundation for being able to create yourself on the next level of who you really are, to set your vision on what you want out of a relationship based on a more true alignment with who you are in terms of what you learned from your body and your emotions.
Right. There's a lot to be learned from getting to know ourselves better in various ways, including those two lenses. I think I have 12 lenses and we can solve, but regardless, where are you at now? Do you want a relationship? Are you just wanting to grow and continue? What does your heart want right now?
It's so interesting to be asked that question this week, because it was 5 years ago this month when, after 20 some years, that I was living under separate roof and being on my own with my dog. I have not had a desire. I think this last round of holidays, starting October, I kind of started feeling a bit lonely. And for the first time over Thanksgiving, I got COVID. I had never had it before. I was so sick, it evolved into a lung infection. Being sick and lonely during this merry this and happy this, just this month, I have started thinking maybe I would open my mind
The possibility of having.
And I have not even had that desire for 5 full years.
Right. You needed some time to get out of what happened and get your feet more firmly in yourself, it sounded like.
Yeah. I still have nightmares. I feel good during the day, but obviously at the subconscious level, I'm still processing everything because I still have nightmares.
Wow. So we can have our original traumas, and then in relationships, we can have additional traumas that pile on top of the original trauma. I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason for this in terms of whether some people have really good childhoods and then they have a traumatic relationship and that's where the trauma is. And other people have a traumatic childhood and perhaps don't have the same learning path where they get into a good relationship. And then there's the people who have a traumatic childhood and then they go into relationships that actually exacerbate that trauma. And then they have even more work to do to sort of heal, not just from the original, how they were raised, but then the future relationships.
Well, that's a good point, like a snowball.
Yeah, so you've got a lot. It's interesting because you've done a lot of work and your body is still processing, your psyche is still processing what you went through. Yeah, which, obviously there's something in there that you aren't finished with yet.
Exactly.
In terms of what it means, why you put up with it, all of that. Jennifer jumping in here again. Trauma takes a long time to unwind and heal. When we have experienced trauma, there's been a difficult or life-threatening or scary event, and we didn't have the support we needed during that event. Had we had the support we needed during that event, it may not have been traumatic or not nearly as traumatic. The trauma is in part caused by not having the support we need when the trauma happened. Trauma can take a long time to work out because it is hardwired into us. It is in our body, in our cells, in our nervous system. And when we get triggered, we will move into a traumatized state of mind, meaning it is as if we are in the original trauma in that moment. We are actually physiologically re-experiencing the trauma. And what we need is support. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, relationships are such amazing teachers. It's just not easy. And if you deal with imago therapy, which is the Hendricks, you probably know that. Yeah, the idea that you draw in the person or persons that will teach you what you need to heal, even if it's a negative. Because if you're with someone who can't change or can't look at themselves, which is quite common, then you're doing the work. The person who can look at themselves will do the work and evolve. And the person who can't look at themselves will not do the work and will not evolve, and they'll move on and perhaps repeat the pattern with someone else. But really, the lucky person is the one who can look at themselves and go, I'm going to change. I don't want this to be my pattern anymore. I'm going to find a new way of relating to myself and to others so that I don't draw this in again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Really how I feel now.
Yeah. So you're spending time going, I'm looking at myself and I'm healing stuff and I deserve more than I got and I'm not going to deal with that anymore.
I like your point too, that there's are levels because about having the nightmares. There's obviously still some gremlins, so I need to be extra attuned to that.
Well, have you done EMDR?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
I did it in San Diego and it actually did help a lot.
It sounds like you might need a couple more sessions just to
Yeah.
deal with the nightmares, because I don't know if people know, but EMDR is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, I think. I hope I got that right. Anyway, they work with moving something back and forth or tapping or lights. And what it does is you're talking about trauma and it's integrating the two hemispheres of the brain. So the trauma isn't lodged somewhere unintegrated. It gets it integrated. And when I did it, I did 11 sessions 5 years ago maybe, and definitely helped me. I actually felt like there was ground under my feet in a different way. I would talk about a traumatic incident and the therapist I was working with would have me talk and wave this thing and my eyes would follow it, the integration part, and the images would change and morph. And I took them to positive images. And so the trauma transformed. I found my power in the process. It was an interesting process.
Yeah, me too. And during the first couple sessions, I got into the deep, deep pain of I'm not good enough and the root of I'm nothing, I'm not good enough.
Right.
And that's the basis of the nightmares too.
Right, exactly. So trying to find that, heal that part of you that was taught.
Yeah. And move into I am lovable as
right. And I am good enough.
Yes.
Yeah, that I'm not good enough is a dangerous voice.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I shouldn't be laughing, but having lived with that myself, in retrospect, there's some humor there.
Yeah. And I still catch myself with that inner voice because, like the current project I'm on in creating curriculum, I want to be further along than I am. So at the end of the day, it's like, was I productive enough? No, I was online too much. This self-judgment, self-analysis of, no, you didn't measure up today to where the level of productivity that you should have. And it's harder when you're in a creative type career or something like that because you have to create it out of nothing.
Jennifer, here again, a little bit more on self-judgment and the critical voice. Often when we've been raised with criticism, with a lack of support, being put down, called names, diminished, all of that, the child internalizes that voice. They don't internalize it's okay, you'll be fine, I'm here for you, because that wasn't present. They internalized the voice that was present. This is called an interject, by the way. And if you were treated in a way that was not supportive, you will most likely have internalized negative voices, and you will need to re-educate those voices. You will need to find the adult part of yourself that can talk to the part of yourself that is little, that is scared, that doesn't believe it's enough, that feels unloved. And you will have to reparent that part as an adult because it didn't happen when you were growing up. Right. Yeah, I know for me, I've driven myself way too hard for way too long. And I'm sure it comes out of something from my childhood we were taught to achieve.
Yeah.
But I also recently I've started this little 5-minute meditation. I do it twice a day, and it's about inviting in my more divine higher self and sitting with that part of me. And the person who taught me this, I won't go into that deeply, but she said, when you're trying to get stuff to happen outside of you, it's like eating dirt. In other words, it's not nourishing the way connecting to yourself deeply is. Yeah. And I was like, oh, I need this to counterbalance everything I'm doing, because I'm doing a lot in the outer world, and it doesn't always feel nourishing. Sometimes it's just like frustration after frustration. And yet when I sit for those few moments and just tune in to, I'm a divine being, my presence, da da da, I feel fulfilled in a different way. And to me, it's really a valuable counterpoint to being out in the world and dealing with, our disintegrating universe or
Ooh,
whatever's
I
going on
like
out
that. I'm
there.
going to do that.
Yeah.
For a while,
I'll
I was
send,
doing that, like in terms of sitting down and writing for 5 minutes and writing from my higher self point of view. But I
right.
haven't done that for a while, but I like the
Yeah.
meditation
Yeah.
to allow that.
It's not
Yeah.
expecting anything of it, but to be for a little bit, to be with your own presence
Yeah.
and, trust that. Yeah. Well, is there anything you want to end with? I feel like we've talked about a lot of good stuff.
To keep posted on the course I'm creating, I'm moving over to Blue Sky, to being you.bsky.social.
Cool. Thank you very much, Janet, for talking today, and I enjoyed our discussion. Thank you for joining me in this podcast. I hope you found it both interesting and informative. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe on whatever channel you like to use. You can also find me on social media, usually under Reconcile. Just a reminder that we have a relationship app called Reconcile to help you create your best relationship. It's in both the Apple App Stores and the Google